Want to go far in business and in life? You can't do it alone. The secret is expanding your network of personal relationships, building friendships, connecting on an intimate level, away from the office, over a coffee or cocktail. Welcome to All In with the real Nate Payo. The show that asks what happens when you go all in and leverage the power of your network of personal relationships.
Hello, welcome to the All In podcast with Nate Payo. Of course, I'm your host, Nate Payo. Today, I'm sitting with a guest I'm extremely happy to bring on board. Hopefully, you guys are too. Get a chance to meet Dayne Sullivan. Dayne is somebody I know through Unconventional Leaders. Voila, surprise. Seems like everybody comes from Heather Parody's Unconventional Leaders group. Dayne is a host of his own podcast called the Daily Dayne. He's also a medical student. So he's clearly a smart, bright, sharp guy with lots of insight into the medical stuff. So welcome to the show, Dayne. How are you?
I'm good. I'm grateful to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So like I said, we kind of, I guess, run a little bit in the same circles. We both found Heather Parody's podcast or a Facebook group called Unconventional Leaders. I found it because I was going ahead and starting this journey of podcasting. I was like, what do podcasters do? Like, how do their websites look like? What shows, what do their show art look like? Where do they post their shows at? Like, what does everything look like? And I was kind of like tracking some people down, and I came across TikTok, and I was looking at people that were doing podcasts on TikTok. I think I found Heather there, and I like went to her page, and then I went to her, Facebook group, and I got plugged into it, and I was like, this is pretty cool. Like, everybody's at different paths in their life and paths of the journey, but they're still really focused, and it's not a spammy group. So I kind of got plugged into it, and then started seeing you around on the posts, and you had your own podcast going. So tell me, Dan, like, what brought you, like, how did you find Unconventional Leaders, and what made you decide you wanted to do a podcast?
So I got the chance to meet Heather back in December. We had a quick breakfast while I was seeing family at Christmas in Georgia. And neither of us to this day remember how we connected. So that is still a mystery. I've been a follower, a fan of Gary Vaynerchuk and the way he does things for probably a decade now. And so I've always toyed with trying to figure out the best way to naturally put out the message that I want to. And, I've played the Instagram game, which I still do. I've tried my hand at writing, which I liked okay, but it was super time consuming. And one day when I heard about Anchor, the podcast app, I figured out that one of the only times that I really had to devote the creative stuff to medical school was when I was traveling in between classes or clinic shifts. So I just downloaded the app on a whim and decided to give it a go, with very, very little time to polish stuff. So it just kind of evolved from there.
Yeah, I think that's a good take on like getting started, because maybe if you had more time, you would have been like, oh, I got to get this right. I got to get a website right, or I have to have everything figured out. And in reality, like, those things don't matter. What matters is starting the journey, figuring out your voice, figuring out how to do it. Like, for me, like, I thought finding guests was going to be the hard part. And it turned out for me, the hard part was really technology stuff. Like, I was having trouble getting stuff to record properly. I was having trouble getting microphones to work. I was having trouble coordinating where I could meet somebody, where I could do my own stuff. And like, I was like, oh my God, this stuff was the hard stuff. Getting the guest wasn't. So how has that impacted your journey of kind of like not really having a chance to maybe think about what you wanted to do, like in the sense of getting everything perfect, but just jumping right in and doing it?
I think I agree. It has been beneficial. I haven't had the chance to, when I've gone back and listened to episodes, of course, as the creator, you hear things that could have been improved and whatnot. But the feedback has been mostly positive, which I was almost surprised by. So I do think it's a big benefit that, obviously as I move forward with it, I want to make sure that it becomes better and better quality. But I do think it was a big advantage just to put it out there without having to try to perfect it.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. So can you tell my audience a little bit about what they could expect? What is the Daily Dane about, and the type of content you like to chat about?
Sure. So I am a naturopathic medical student out of Seattle, Washington. And so the Daily Dane is really just my day-to-day thoughts on the things that are going on in the medical community. Obviously right now there's a lot of talk with the coronavirus, but before and again, once this is over, like it's just looking at the things that are put out there and trying to make sense of them and saying like, is this a good idea just from my perspective and trying to get other physicians and non-physicians on there to kind of give their take and give a good perspective of where things are from a medical standpoint.
I think that's a really cool topic to be involved with from a podcaster, because like if you're interested in something that's going on, like medically wise, just like an average layperson, you say, okay, I want to find some information about it. Like the medical journals are like super technical and hard for anybody to really comprehend and do anything about with, or then you're going to go the opposite end of the spectrum, which is you're going to get your information from, your local Facebook groups, which is pseudoscience. Who knows if it's good advice or bad advice or not. So you're kind of stuck in this in between stuff. And I like the fact that you could get doctors and medical professionals to come in and talk about the real issues, but at like an understandable point of view and how it's relating to the day-to-day cycles.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's important to not only do that, but in addition to try to mesh together. I've listened to a lot of shows that's just physicians or just practitioners, and I've listened to other shows that are just patient stories. And I think it's crucial that we have a place where both of those come.
Yeah. Where's your expertise or main focus of interest at?
My main focus from a medical standpoint is learning about gastrointestinal stuff. So really GI issues, which plague a ton of people in America, and really looking at that at what I call evidence-based natural medicine, because like you said, there's a lot more out there that can be beneficial to people other than just pharmaceutical medications. But at the same time, there's a lot of swing that, this kind of anti-pharmacy push in America that's like, oh, it's natural, it has to be good for me. And that's not always the case. They're trying to shine a light on that is where my main focus is.
Yeah, there's a bit of both, right? It's some things are good and some things aren't bad, and they're not the same for everybody. So I think, I've had some conversations with some other people in like the health and fitness world, and I don't know what it is about people wanting to get into internet wars about being like super, super right. And you go, this has no medical backing at all. But like if somebody wants to get better at physical fitness or get better at healthiness, like the first thing, if they're starting from nowhere, is like, okay, I think you want to have like a baseline, and then you start looking at calorie consumption. Then you start looking at, how much are you moving, and then improving upon that. And then people will be in there like, no, you have to follow this exact diet, and this is bad, and legumes are bad, and you can't eat nightshades. And you're like, this person maybe has like a McDonald's fast food diet. Like let's focus on just getting incrementally better versus just going like into the weeds about, if someone's getting upset. Now that could be if there's a allergic reaction to something somebody's eating about, like, hey, don't eat nuts if that's something you're allergic to. But at the same time, like just slight improvements are. But people will go like nuts on anecdotal evidence or what they've read on science studies. It's just saying like this diet is for everybody, and if you even vary off of it, like your results are going to be horrendous. And then it's not the same. Dude, you think that it's better to have an individualized program or like a one size fits all?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's very few things in health and medicine that is a one size fits all approach. And to what you were saying before, I am always fascinated by the people that, if you decided you wanted to pick up a sport, if you wanted to learn how to play basketball, you don't need LeBron James as shooting coach on day one. That's overwhelming. You need to learn how to dribble. You need to learn how to shoot layups. Like, you need to learn the basic rules, and then you can move on from there. And I think it's interesting that, people decide, like, I'm going to get healthy. And so that means, like, I'm only going to eat, a raw vegan diet and take 20 supplements. And that, like, it's just unrealistic. And I think you see a lot more benefit taking incremental steps than you do just trying to go all in.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that holds people back that do want to make changes in their lives from getting started because it's too overwhelming?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's any different than most other aspects of life, especially with health. Yeah, it can be overwhelming, and it gets to the point where it's like, well, why bother? And just very little of life works that way. Like you said, if it's some life-threatening thing, then absolutely, we have to take drastic measures. But for the average person who wants to get healthy, we have some time.
Yeah, right. So going back to your podcast, like, would your podcast be focused for the average person to listen and learn from, or do they need a bit of medical background and knowledge to kind of understand what you're talking about?
No, I try to put it out there so that the average public can gain knowledge from it. The physicians, I hope there's some that listen to it, but there's already a multitude of ways, and I'm not a physician, so I can't educate other physicians. So I try to put it out there to say, hey, let's break down and see what's really going on for the person that wants to know more but is confused by the stuff that's put out there. And then I provide references for everything that we talk about. So if they want to dive further into it, they can. Yeah,
that's a good approach, that like the average person can have a voice, an educated voice, talk about it, give them guidance where to go, but you could still get, some interest. And that's, I think, what podcasting is it's like you find it a topic you're interested in, it piques your interest, and then you dive down more and you follow more down where the rabbit hole goes from. So, sometimes you get really into one person's message and you want to learn everything that they have to say, or sometimes it's like that message is like a topic and you want to consume everything about that topic from a variety of opinions. So, going back to getting started, you talked about Gary Vaynerchuk and you've been a follower of his for like 10 years. So like, did that shape like why you like had this idea of having a voice on social media platforms versus just kind of, hey, being, your usual doctor, you go to the doctor's office and visit?
Yeah, I mean, there's two big reasons. The first one was I didn't want to just be a consumer of everything. I'm a big fan of, everybody should try to contribute in some way. So I wanted to find a way to produce things. And then two, I wanted to try to put a message out there. We have to be very careful. As medical students, we can't talk about anything that is construed as medical advice before we're a licensed doc. So I wanted to find a way that I could give my input without giving medical advice, and try to build a following and audience so that it's not as staggering to launch a practice once I graduate.
What's been your experience so far with building your podcast? How's that, like, from the day you started to where you're at now, where you think you want to go? How has that changed along the way?
It's interesting because I chose the name the Daily Dayne, and Heather's talked about this too, and she changed hers. There may be a name change down the line because I feel like just because of schedule constraints, I don't ever have enough time to read up on what I really want to say day to day, and so it may move to like a weekly thing in the future, which makes the name a little awkward. But my biggest thing is being able to confidently talk about what you want to talk about without having to perfect it and wrestling with what that balance looks like.
Yeah, I would agree with that because when I was getting started, I didn't know my voice, and I was like, well, do I want to talk about this? But I also like talking about these other things. So like, is it going to be weird if I'm like, motivation and networking and building, businesses like 5 days out of the week. And then I said, like, I want to talk about, CrossFit for a few days, or I want to talk about this music I was listening to. And it always comes back to Gary Vaynerchuk. And he pointed out like, hey, your niche is you. Like, so you be yourself. And if you're the person that's like, giving business advice, but you're an LA Lakers basketball fan, like that's something that people are going to relate to. And so I kind of like go, hey, you know what? It doesn't really matter. I have a unique perspective on life. And when I'm being myself authentically, like I've found I'm more relatable to people. A lot of times when I share something that has nothing to do with like what my main message is, like if I start being vulnerable and say, hey, I'm struggling with this, this issue. And for me, I started talking about how I was drinking more often than I thought I should be. And I was like, hey, I'm not necessarily rock bottom. Haven't hit like this alcoholic's breaking point, but I was like, I just definitely drinking more than I want to. And it's reflected in like, I was putting on weight and I wasn't seeing progress in the gym. And I was like, it's the alcohol. Like I need to cut the alcohol out. But then every night I get home, be like, wow, tomorrow will be it. I want a beer today. And then all of a sudden I'm like every day. So I started talking about that openly. And all of a sudden some people started coming out of the not out of the woodwork, but some people reached out to me like, hey, I struggle with that same thing. And I didn't even know that they were listening or following me on social media. And I was like, oh, cool. And so like we started having these conversations. And now I feel like a closer friend to that person that I knew in a business perspective because of this discussion we had. So I think being relatable about multiple topics is good. And you're right, like the daily day, like how do you do the daily day if it's not daily? But you know, at the same time, it's like you could also spin it and say like, hey, you know, it's daily, it's not every day, it's just when I'm ready to do it, and it could be a play on words, or it could be easily pivoted and change the name because, you know, it sucks to start over, but at the same time, if you have to do it, you know what you're doing. It's not as hard. There's not this learning curve you have to do. And you can always just tell people like, hey, I'm moving over here. And the people are going to go with you that are active and current. The people that really, really are following you, they're the ones that are going to go over there with you. And so it might make for a better sense. And then too, you know, some people might be following you and saying, hey, I wish you'd go a little deeper in something. And you're going to have that opportunity to do so.
Yep, I've definitely gotten that feedback too. Is hey, you know, I'd rather listen to a little bit longer episode and go deeper. So, one other thing that you said always comes back to Gary, and it always does for me too. And a lot of things. One of the things he said is like with his Instagram, even he said, yeah, I told my team to start posting stuff. We were going to start posting content that we didn't think would work. And he said, we were shocked that a lot of the times the stuff that we were like, well, no, we don't talk about that. And he's like, no. You may be shocked that the stuff that you talk about, like what happened with you, people sometimes come out of nowhere and be like, hey, I'm so glad you talked about this. Like, this is something that struggles with me. And so that's something that I've wrestled with as a medical student, to say, hey, I struggle with X. And you sometimes are surprised that other people around you are like, oh, me too. I'm glad somebody broke the silence.
Yeah. And to be honest, like when I was following your podcast, like the one that kind of like really piqued my interest was like, I was like, oh, you're giving daily, a medical take on stuff that's going on. And then you're like, oh shit, the coronavirus is going on and it's hit me personally. So I was like, this is a really compelling story because you're getting, I felt like I was getting a bit of a more professional take on something, but it still had the personal touch to it. So it's not just the doctors getting up on the news channels and talking about the statistics and the things to do, or people yipping and yapping on Twitter about all this stuff that a lot of it was, very compelling information, but a lot of it was like hysteria or misinformation or just, rumors being spread. And you go, okay, this is really cool that I'm getting a take that's personal and professional at the same time. And there's not a lot of people that have that background that you have to be able to do that message.
No, thank you. I'm glad you got something out of it.
So yeah, it's interesting how that works. Like, and this show is a show like centered around networking, with that being like the forefront of like, hey, you can't get places in life, you can't make an impact in life if you're not using other people to help you get there. Like nobody really can get anywhere on their own. They need help, or they have other people that support them, that bring them place, whether they're people that educated them, that give them the tools to get where they're going, or they're people on the team that are supporting, or they're people that introduce them to some other people that open a lot of doors for them. And it's just amazing how that journey takes us, because had I not decided that I wanted a podcast, that I wouldn't have gotten plugged into a podcasters group, and then I wouldn't have met Heather, and I wouldn't have met you. And I think you've probably have had a similar journey. Like, how has, this path of one, I'm going to med school, two, I'm doing podcasting, how has that influenced the people you've met and the networks and the influence you've seen and over this short period of time, and how has that worked out for you?
I mean, I've had a really good experience. I feel like I've been lucky. It's allowed me to connect with some physicians that, I was able to get them on episodes. But then, I had a medical student in Portland, Brooke Campbell, a few episodes ago, and it was really cool for us to chat about, everybody's wondering, like, how is the other schools handling this? How is other professions handling this? And it was really cool to get her take and find out, like, one, a lot of the challenges that we're having in Seattle, they're also having in Portland.
Mm-hmm.
It was also nice to hear, oh, well, this is how we're handling it. Oh, okay, maybe I'll try that. And so it's like you said, like, nobody's going to get through this and achieve something really great on their own. And I think, if anything, this chapter that we're in right now has kind of illustrated that all the more, that, collaboration is key. It always has been, it always will be. And, that's one of the things that hasn't changed with everything going on, is we need people, whether it's talking to them over the phone or Zoom calls, or it's, giving them a hug in person, that we need people more than ever. And so I'm almost thankful that, since this had to happen, that a lot of people had that perspective reinforced.
Mm-hmm. I think there's definitely going to be a shift, if there isn't already, of people using some of the technology that's been at our fingertips for a while, more powerfully, instead of it just being like, oh, I'll FaceTime somebody I know. Like, you get on a Zoom call, but now you go, hey, this doesn't have to be just somebody I met on LinkedIn that I just know through what they post, but like, I could reach out, I could connect with them, I could talk to them, and I could get introduced to somebody else that they know, and kind of grow this network nationally, especially if you're very interested in very specific things. Like, you could go down a rabbit hole and really get plugged into something that really piques your interest. So cool stuff. Well, I'm glad you're able to join me on the show today. I appreciate you taking time. I know you've been super busy between med school and probably everything going on around here. So where can people find your show if they want to take a listen to it?
The best way to do it is just go to anchor.fm/Dayne with a /Sullivan. You can go to the link on Instagram, which is just at Dayne Sully with a Y. And if you go on iTunes and just search the Daily Dayne, you can do that on iTunes or Spotify.
Very cool. So I'll have all those links up on my show notes so people can easily link to it and find you. And looking forward to seeing your podcast, seeing your journey evolve. And as you become go from medical student to a licensed doctor, then it'll be awesome to see that journey progress and the knowledge and the value you'll provide to people. So thanks a lot for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Appreciate it.
Make sure to visit our website, therealnatepeo.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, so you'll never miss an episode of All In. While you're at it, if you found value, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if simply tell 2 friends about the show. Looking to connect? You can find Nate Peo on LinkedIn or Instagram.